Welcome to the What I Wish I Knew After Pregnancy Loss podcast. I am your host, Shana Southern. I am an angel mum, a rainbow mum, a pregnancy loss practitioner, and trauma-informed coach. I created the Institute of Healing Through Pregnancy Loss out of my own experience with loss in the hopes to provide understanding and healing, educating people on pregnancy loss, and creating more women or men in trained support roles. In this podcast, I hope to shed light on what I wish I knew in relation to pregnancy loss, opening up the conversation, breaking the stigma, and bringing real-life stories plus guest experts. Thank you for being here with me today, and let's dive into today's episode. Welcome to the podcast, the intersection of pregnancy loss, fertility, trauma, and purpose, having the conversations that should have been happening all along. Today, I have with me Dimi Sfetsas. Dimi is an assistant principal with a lifelong dedication to working with children. At 47, she has built her career around supporting young people's growth and development. Her journey has included navigating the challenges of fertility preservation through multiple egg freezing cycles and IVF rounds, as well as experiencing cervical ectopic pregnancy. While motherhood remains a hope she continues to pursue, her commitment to nurturing the next generation defines her professional life. Welcome, Dimi. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
You're so welcome.
Thank you. It's a bit nervous. Sorry, I just have to put that out there. I've never done anything like this before, so I'm feeling a little bit nervous.
No, you're in good hands. It's just going to be like a conversation with friends. And I think we've caught up a couple of times before, once inside a support group and then once as well in the lead up to this podcast. And I love, essentially, this conversation is about shifting the narrative, shifting the conversations that are currently happening, because there's not enough. There's not enough that is being spoken about, whether it is fertility and IVF struggles, whether it is pregnancy loss or reproductive challenges. So the fact that you're here, even though you're nervous, just to have this conversation, it's important. Your story is inevitably going to support someone else through their challenge, their hardship, their sort of darkest moments where they are right now. And I just want to thank you for being here.
No problem. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I think the reason I said yes was also I think it's a conversation that's not had enough. And I suppose personally for myself, I haven't really spoken about what I've been through a lot. The IVF stuff more so with friends who are really close, but with the pregnancy loss, not so much. So I think it's an important conversation to have. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to acknowledge the courage that it's taking you to show up to talk about these things, especially if you haven't really spoken about them much before, and to come onto a podcast and maybe be the first place that you're fully diving into that part of your story.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to acknowledge that.
Thank you.
That's okay. So, did you want to share your story?
Yeah, I guess I'll start with the pregnancy loss because I think that's where it first started. I'd had one egg freeze cycle back in 2019 initially because I just turned 40, and I think prior to that egg freezing wasn't something that was spoken about all that much. And I was 40, I was single, and I had never really cared about age or where I was at in my journey in life. But when I turned 40, I actually had a panic attack, and it never happened before. I'd always had a birthday party for every birthday. And then on my 40th, I actually cancelled my 40th because I'd had this panic attack. And it was all, I guess, around the feeling of running out of time with fertility. So I had an egg freeze cycle and ended up getting one egg. And I remember the fertility clinic that I was at, and it was my first cycle, and I didn't really know much about fertility at all, to be quite honest. I just knew that my AMH was very low. I got one egg, and they referred me straight away to egg donors, and they said, "Oh, you should consider, if you want to be a mother, consider egg donors." And I was just very overwhelmed at the time. And I thought, just put everything on hold. And they said, for you to get pregnant with this AMH level, it would be very unlikely to get pregnant naturally, or you'd have to consider egg donorship. So I left it. And then following that, I ended up meeting someone and was in a relationship, and it actually ended up being through COVID. And when we opened up for 2 weeks in the July, because Melbourne shut down quite a lot in the July period, where I think we had 2 weeks where we opened up, June, July, we went away for the weekend. And then 2 weeks or 3 weeks later, I found out I was pregnant. So I was in shock with the pregnancy test. So I was actually really surprised, having been told that it would take a miracle for me to get pregnant. I think that was a big shock to begin with. So then I went and had a blood test to confirm, and they confirmed, my doctor, my GP confirmed that I was pregnant. She was very excited because all along she'd always ask me, so who are you dating? What are you doing? What's happening? And she's like, wow, this. And then she said, we can't get too excited because you're 41. I was 41 now. And we need to be realistic about what pregnancy is at 41. Anyway, so within 4 days, I started bleeding. And then I remember thinking, oh, okay, so I'm having miscarriage. Obviously, really disappointed. And then I remember, I just didn't really know what to do, but I just remember I kept bleeding. And I was thinking, oh, there seems to be quite a bit of blood. Like from having spoken to friends and all of that, I was thinking, I just don't think that this is normal. It was about 11 p.m. at night. And then I called the nurse online, or the nurse, and she said, you probably should go to a hospital. She goes, yes, it could potentially just be a miscarriage, but if there's quite a bit of blood. And it was 11 o'clock, and I was like, oh, can I wait till tomorrow? And she said, no. She goes, you probably should try to get to a hospital tonight. I was like, okay. So I woke up my partner at the time, and I'm like, oh, I think we need to go to the hospital. And so we did, and they kept me there till probably about 6 o'clock in the morning, and they monitored me, and they did an ultrasound, like just a normal ultrasound. And they said, oh, that seems to be like a normal miscarriage. You need to go home, and then you see your GP, or you see your doctor. So then I went home, and at 6 a.m. and just still kept bleeding and kept bleeding. And I thought, okay, they've told me to stay home, and I've been going to see my doctor. So I went back and saw my doctor, and she was still very excited because I hadn't told her anything. And she goes, no, the blood tests come back, you're definitely pregnant, blah, blah, blah. And I said, oh, I've started bleeding. Anyway, I told her what happened, and she said, we'll do another blood test, because if it is a miscarriage, your HCG levels should be going down. And then 2 days later, she called and she's like, there's something's not right. Your levels are still going up. So then she said, I think you need to come back in. And I went back in, and she said, she called an obstetrician who was her friend and said, this is happening. I'm just worried about her having an ectopic pregnancy. And given that she's 41, like, we want to try and preserve her fallopian tubes, because she thought it would have been a fallopian tube ectopic, which apparently is the most common type of ectopic pregnancy. I didn't know much about it at the time. And so she sent me off for an internal ultrasound. And so then they noticed that it had implanted in my cervix, which again, and then she said, oh no, you have to go and see an obstetrician. So she referred me, and it was just, everything was a blur. So all of this happened within a space of about 4 days or 5 days. So I found out that I'm pregnant, thought I was having a miscarriage. Now it's an ectopic, and I was just like, I just don't know what's happening. So I went to see an obstetrician who she referred me to. And he said, and he drew a diagram, and he's like, this is where it normally should be. Sometimes they're in the fallopian tube. If they're in the fallopian tube, we would normally just cut it out, and you lose your fallopian tube and that ovary, all of that. And then he said, but yours has implanted here in your cervix. He goes, which is a lot trickier, because there's a lot of blood vessels there. There's high risk of hemorrhage. He goes, but you're very lucky. He goes, because 15 years ago, we would have had to have a hysterectomy. He goes, but now there's actually, we can treat it. And I said, okay, great. So how do we treat it? And I remember just things go through your mind. And even my partner at the time, they're like, but what do they mean? Can't they just move it to somewhere to where it's supposed to be? And I said, I'm pretty sure that's not an option. Otherwise, they would have suggested it. Anyway, so then the obstetrician goes, okay, so the treatment is, I said, so what's the treatment? He said, so you'll need to go to, he was going to send me to another hospital. He goes, they'll do another pelvic ultrasound. And what they'll do is they'll have to inject the pregnancy with methotrexate, which is a cancer, I don't know, but it's a cancer drug, a treatment for cancer. He goes, so we'll inject it with that. He said, and then they'll remove the pregnancy. So I was like, oh, okay, that sounds pretty straightforward. I was still in a blur, but I was like, okay, so I need to, and he gave me the referral for the ultrasound and with a letter, and he goes, you need to go to this hospital. So I ended up going to Monash Hospital, and I was in the emergency area, and then they brought a doctor because at that time I didn't have obstetrics under my private health cover because he wanted to send me to Cabrini, but he said go to Monash, and they were really amazing there. But so then the doctor that came in and saw me said, okay, so we've got to, that examined me and all of that. And then they said, so we'll have to do this treatment. We'd need to do another ultrasound first, and then we'll come up with a plan of action from there. So then they took me out, another ultrasound. And then the doctor who came to see me said, and I just remember I just burst into tears. He said, okay, so, because I thought I was going in for a procedure and then I was going to go home. And so then he said, so you'll have to stay in here for the next 3 weeks. And I said, oh,
Wow.
pardon? I said, what do you mean? And he said, oh, you have to stay in hospital for 3 weeks. And I said, I don't understand. I thought I was coming in for this procedure. They were going to inject it and then I was going to go home. And he said, no, he said, you can't go home. He said, because of where it is, I'm trying to remember how he said it. He said, because of where it is, because you're at a high risk of haemorrhage. He said, you have to stay. We have to monitor you. He said, we will inject it with the methotrexate. He said, but we also have to, I had to stay and he had to give me 3 more injections of the methotrexate. He said, then we have to wait. We actually have to wait. The methotrexate will make the pregnancy shrink and all the vessels constrict, the blood vessels to the placenta. He said, and then we will have to safely remove it. He said, but you can't go home because until all of that happens, like you're at risk of hemorrhage. And then if you're not nearby, we won't be able to look after you. So then I just remember bursting into tears because you're in this hallway, like in the hospital. And I was like, I can't stay here for 3 weeks. I can't stay here. And then it was what it was. I had to stay in for 3 weeks. So then I was like, oh, I didn't bring anything with me. I just brought my handbag. I thought I was going home at the end of today.
Yeah, you felt a bit
So you felt a bit
blindsided.
blindsided. Oh, it was, I was just like, I just don't understand what is happening. And I didn't understand why the obstetrician didn't
Mm.
mention that. He was just like, oh, you're just going to go in. It's under ultrasound guided, like the ultrasound,
Yeah.
and we'll inject it. And then he didn't explain about it needing to shrink or anything like that. So I just felt like that there wasn't much explanation around it. And I don't know whether they just think, I mean, I hadn't even heard of a cervical ectopic until at this point. Apparently they're 2% or less than 2% of pregnancies are ectopic, and of the 2%, of that 2%, less than 0.1% are cervical ectopic. So it was very rare. Anyway, so then I had to stay in hospital, and it ended up being 6 weeks in hospital, not 3 weeks. So it ended up being 6 weeks. Firstly, they injected my thigh. So I had the methotrexate in the thigh first. So I had 3 shots of that. And then I went in to do the guided ultrasound, and to inject the pregnancy with that, and you know what's going to happen. But I just remember going in there and lying there, and they're like, yeah, there's a heartbeat. At the end of this, there won't be.
So it was a very, very cold delivery.
Yeah, it's their job, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Take your
And I
time.
remember the doctor, he was really nice because there was COVID and you weren't allowed to have anybody there. So I was pretty much in there for the 6 weeks by myself. People dropped by, like outside the hospital, and I'd duck out and say hi to them. But for this procedure, I was by myself. And this poor doctor, he was really lovely because it was something that was like very rare. He came in and he said, oh, do you mind if I'm in here for this? He goes, and do you mind if there's a couple of other like medical students or whoever they were? And I said, no, that's absolutely fine. But I was, and he just goes, hold my hand. And I felt really sorry for him because I literally grabbed his hand and I was squeezing it and I didn't let go. And I was like, oh, this poor guy, he's like, what did I say here? Hold my hand. Anyway, but he was really kind. And then, yeah, and then 10 minutes later, the procedure was over. And then it was like, that was the 10th of August. And then I was in hospital until the 19th of September. So then it was like a waiting game. So they said, yeah, now we just have to wait to see if the pregnancy shrinks and we'll have to monitor you. They had to do a couple more injections of the methotrexate following that. And then it was just waiting to see if the pregnancy would pass or when it was safe to remove it, or if it would shrink. It was supposed to shrink, which it didn't. But yeah. So then it was just every day blood tests and like physically I was fine because that was done, and I still was bleeding throughout a little bit. And to be honest, every day I was thinking, is this the day that I'm just going to start bleeding and hemorrhaging? And that was pretty scary. But then it was getting through the next 6 weeks, which at the time I didn't know was 6 weeks. I thought still thought it was 3 weeks, but then it extended out to 6 weeks. Yeah.
So it would have been a very heavy
Yeah.
time for you. Like you wouldn't have had a chance, like through, like you said, throughout all of that experience, it was just this like one thing after another, like things coming at you the whole time. Like
Yes.
information, you need to have this done, you need to do this, and your body's miscarrying. It's going through the process. And even in the hospital, like you said, you're getting the injections, you're having blood tests. Like it's this constant triggering of the emotion of what's happening to you. There wouldn't have been a
Mm.
moment for you to really gather yourself and help yourself through that.
No, I just remember thinking the whole time I was in there, I really need to keep it together while I'm in here. I really need to keep it together. And I remember, like, after the procedure, obviously, because I was in a shared room as well. It was one of those rooms of four. And my GP was also really kind. Like, she was actually the one that kept persisting that there was something not right. And I will always be very grateful to her. She was so amazing. She gave me her number, and she would text me her mobile number, and she was messaging me throughout the whole thing. And she said, just see if they can get you a private room. It was COVID, there was so much going on. And she was like, just see if they can get you a room by yourself. So I kept trying to ask them, but it wasn't going to happen. But because I was in a space of four people, you've got that curtain, but you don't really have a lot of privacy. And I remember after the procedure, I did fall apart and I was just in floods of tears, and the nurses kept coming in and, are you okay? And I was like, yeah, I'm okay. I said, you know what's going to happen. And I know that there was a pregnancy and now there's not. I said, and I know that. I said, but it's still really hard to deal with. And I remember, like, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to deal with it. I was still really in shock of all of the things that it had happened, and it had been in the space of about 8 days that it had all unfolded from finding out I was pregnant to this procedure. So it all happened very quickly. But I just remember feeling like really heartbroken. And the thing, and I remember my partner called me that night and I told him what happened. I was like, it was just really hard that there was the heartbeat and then there was no heartbeat. And I was just in floods of tears. And then he goes, oh, I had a great day. And I was like,
No.
oh, and I remember hanging up on him, and I don't hang up on people. And I just remember hanging up the phone and thinking, I just can't deal with this. I went for a run and I just hung up. And I was like, I don't want to hear anymore. And I don't want him to have a bad day, but there was just not even an acknowledgement of, oh, are
Yeah.
you okay? Or how are you feeling? Or there was just nothing. And I think people don't know how to deal, or people don't know how to respond when someone's going through something really hard. And to be honest, at that point, I wasn't even considering him or where he was at, because I was the one that was in the hospital. But I did hang up on him. And then I remember I just didn't take his call for the next couple of days, which wasn't very nice. But I just needed to process what was happening. And then eventually, when I spoke to him, I said, I know I shouldn't have hung up. I said, but I'd just been through this horrible thing by myself, and you wanted to tell me about your run. And I said, and I just couldn't hear it at that time. I just couldn't. It was a shitty thing to do,
But
but
you need to do these things in those moments because you weren't witnessed at all. He asked you or I don't know how the conversation started, but it was on you, and you're like, "I'm here. This is really hard. This is really emotional," and he doesn't. There wasn't even 1 ounce of witnessing in that. He shifts it straight to him. So
mm,
you in any you need to it can't be one-sided, like it needs to be.
mm,
So I feel like it's a very valid reaction is to say, look, I need to look after me right now. I need to, and I think these are the moments that we can be really selfish and we can
mm,
be like, I need to put the blinders on or blinkers, blinders, whatever the horses wear,
yeah,
and just
yeah,
laser focus in on me. And if you can't see me, if you can't even acknowledge just a little bit me in this,
mm,
I'm glad that you've had a great day. I'm glad that you're okay and you're having fun, and that's okay, like completely valid too. But
yeah.
there was it was a one-way
There
street,
wasn't.
really. Yeah.
No. So that was why I just needed to get off the phone. And I just remember feeling like really, I wasn't alone. I wasn't, because I had friends that I was calling, and my sister who lived nearby who was dropping past, and it was lockdown. So I wasn't working, but I would still check in with my team. Like I had my laptop there. And so I wasn't alone, but I remember going through the procedure by yourself. Like it was just really hard. Yeah, and this poor doctor who just, like, I was squeezing his hand so hard, and I didn't realize how hard I was squeezing his hand until afterwards. And I was like, oh my God, thank you. I'm so sorry. He's like, no, that's okay. But yeah, so it did feel like I did feel alone in that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
which was really
sometimes
tough.
you can be surrounded by people and still feel alone. You can be surrounded by like love the people that you love, like friends and family and a doctor that is
Yeah,
there for you, but you can still feel alone.
yeah,
And I think pregnancy loss is one of the and infertility too. It's the one of the most isolating experiences because
yeah,
you can be surrounded by people and feel so alone and so unseen. And that in itself is the one of the hardest things.
yeah, yeah. It was really hard. And I don't know, having been in the hospital and then knowing that I had to stay in at that point for 3 more weeks, I was like, I just need to keep it together because that's what you're supposed to do. You have to keep it together and then see how I am when I get home, when I get back to my place. But yeah, and I got through and I had to create myself a routine. And I think that's how I got through the 3 weeks because physically I felt fine, like I felt normal, but mentally, like it was processing what had just happened and also thinking, I remember thinking, how did this happen? Obviously, we know how it happened because we all know how you get pregnant, but I was like, how did this happen? Having been told after one egg free cycle that I would really struggle to get pregnant and that they'd referred me to an egg donor in South Africa, to egg donors in Greece. How did this happen? So then I was like, okay, I just need to understand a bit more about fertility. So I did a little bit of research while I was in there as well, just because I hadn't at this point. You just trust you trust the specialists that you go to see. But I did a little bit of research at that. What I did to get through the next 3 weeks was create a routine in the hospital. So I was in this room of 4 and you could just very easily just sit for the next 3 weeks. But every morning started with a blood test. So even though I wanted to sleep like at 7 o'clock in the morning, they'd come in and do a blood test because they wanted to track the HCG levels. So they'd do that. Then I'd get up, I'd have a shower, I'd go downstairs, I would wear my mask, walk downstairs to the coffee shop, get a coffee, walk around the downstairs of the hospital, the inside of the hospital, like I do like laps around in a circle. And so then that would bring me, I would do my makeup every day. I said I had my sister come to my place and bring my makeup, books, just things, bring me my blanket. Like I need to be comfortable. So she and my partner at the time came and brought all this massive suitcase to the hospital and they said, oh, I said, I'm here for 3 weeks, so I need my stuff, my work laptop. And then it was just a routine. So coffee, walk, come back, do a little bit of work at the start. And that was just commenting on kids' work. I wasn't Zooming the class at that time. I was still in the classroom. I wasn't doing any of the online learning stuff because the team was doing that. So they would post the videos to my class, but I would check some of their work that they'd posted and make comments on that. I'd have my team meetings. And then after lunch, I wouldn't really do anything because lunch comes at 12 and then I'd watch something on Netflix and then I'd go for another walk in the afternoon and then I got into the game show. So then at 5 o'clock, I would watch with dinner because dinner was at 5 in the hospital. I was like, okay. So dinner was at 5 or 5:30. And then I would watch the game show. So I'd watch The Chase or whatever the game show was at the time. And then I'd make phone calls and call friends. And then at 9 o'clock or whatever, you'd go to sleep. And then you'd do the same thing again the next day. Blood test, 7 o'clock in the morning, the lights would come on. A blood test, shower, makeup, coffee, walk around, do my walk around. And then every now and again, someone would come and visit. So I'd go and sit out the front and have a visit, maybe a team meeting. And then again, and then I kept asking for a private room. And then at night, it was really hard because you're not doing anything. So you're not sleeping that well. And there's a lot of thoughts going through your mind about what's happened and what's going on and what's going to happen because I was getting a bit of cramping and then I would be like, and then I'd have a little bit of bleeding and they would say, has anything happened? Has anything passed? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what it's supposed to look like. I don't know what I'm looking for. I don't know. If it had have happened, I probably would have known, but I didn't know. What am I supposed to be looking for? What is it that's supposed to look like if it passes? So then I was scared as well because they had a cannula thing in my arm just in case I started bleeding so they could give me blood. So then I was like, when I was cramping, I was like, is this am I going to start bleeding? There was always that fear as well, because they were saying that if you start bleeding, like, we're going to have to take you to do surgery and you might end up having a hysterectomy. So that was always part of it as well, was that if anything happens and with the bleeding, and if they have to go in to remove the pregnancy before it's ready, there is the potential that we have to take your uterus. And I was like, oh my God, this is too much. This is too much. And then I was like, oh my God, what does this mean? Does this mean that I'm going to go into early menopause? Because I was still 41. I was like, what does this mean? And then, so then I was having those conversations. And then he said, no, we won't take your ovaries. Like, we'll keep your ovaries. But if this happens, we'll have to take the partial hysterectomy, which is the take your uterus but leave your ovaries there.
1 in 4 pregnancies will result in miscarriage. 1 in 8 women will experience infertility. 1 in 100 women will experience recurrent miscarriage. And 1 in 160 births end in stillbirth. Have you been wanting to make a difference in the lives of women or men who have experienced pregnancy loss because you can see so many suffering in silence, but you just don't know how? Collectively, we can change how bereaved parents can access mental, physical, and emotional support after their experience. There is a lot of women with unhealed trauma, and there is a huge gap in the current support system when it comes to bereaved parents' recovery after loss. There are too many women and men suffering in silence. The Pregnancy Loss Practitioner Certification is a worldwide, one-of-a-kind program that gives you proven methods designed for healthcare professionals, medical staff, midwives, nurses, doulas, birth workers, coaches, and angel parents alike. The Pregnancy Loss Practitioner Certification is bridging that gap. It will give you a proven support structure to follow and education specific to pregnancy loss, created by a loss mum. It is creating more education specifically for loss so that you can enhance your service and become the point of difference. Or you can create the support that you so desperately needed in your healing after loss. This is the next level of growth and expansion you have been searching for. So does this sound like something that you have been searching for? Let's explore this more together. You can head to the episode show notes where you'll find the program application, or direct message me on Instagram and let's open up the conversation in how you can use this education. You have a gift, and I look forward to supporting you and witnessing you bring your gift to the world, healing and transforming women's lives.
And I was like, okay, so I won't go into early menopause. That's good. But every day the fear was there, and you think you're doing okay. And it wasn't until, so then I was like, okay, I'm getting into a routine. I feel like this is getting me through. It was very monotonous, but it's getting me through. Like, I have my morning routine, I have my afternoon routine. And then there were times where I would just, when they'd start with the cannulas and the needles and felt like a pin cushion, when they'd start, because I had to change the cannula thing every 3rd day, and some of the nurses were better at doing it than others, and there was blood going everywhere with this one guy, just this nurse. I felt really bad for him, but I just started crying, and I'm like, just stop. I said, no, just leave it. Can you just get somebody else to do it? I said, because he kept persisting, and there was just blood all over my arm, and I was like, just stop. And he was like, sorry. And then he got somebody else to do it. But so there were times like that where I was like, it's too much. But then, because every day I would go and do my walk and all of that. And then the head nurse came to see me one day. He goes, oh, I need to speak to you. And I said, oh, I was like, what have I done? I thought I'd done something wrong, because I was always up and walking around, and I'm like, oh, what's happened? And he said, so my sanity was that I was getting up and going for this walk every day and my coffee. So then he came over and he said, oh, I just need to let you know that you've been exposed to someone, one of our nurses has COVID. Oh. And you've been exposed. And at that time it was 2020. Yeah. So it was the first year. He goes, so we have to put you in So I got my private room. He goes, we have to put you in a room for the next 10 days. So then it got worse. So because then for the next 10 days, I got a private room. I got a single room, but I couldn't leave the single room. So then I was in that room. It had no window.
Oh, you're kidding.
No. It had a bathroom. I had my own bathroom
But you're in a cell, pretty much.
with the window. It was actually outside the nurse's station. So there was a lot of movement going on, but I couldn't leave. So then I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do now? Like for the next 10 days without even being able to go for a walk or get my coffee. And then I just remember thinking, I just don't know how I'm going to get through the next 10 days. But I called my sister. I said, you need to bring me a yoga mat.
I need to figure something else out.
I need to work something out. And to be honest, in the end, I did start off doing some yoga. Like I'd close the curtain, I with the cannula out of my arm, all of that. I would still do my yoga, bit of yoga in the morning. I couldn't get my coffee. And the hospital coffee is shit. Terrible. It's the worst. So then I don't know, I just had to go, okay, I'm just in bed for the next 10 days, essentially. Like I couldn't do anything except for the yoga. And at that point, I just couldn't do work anymore. I was like, I can't do this. I can't do work. Yeah.
You'd
And
reached
I
your
just,
capacity.
yeah.
Yeah.
I just remember standing it. And it's funny what irritates you. The food is also average in hospital, but you get to choose. But then because the poor nurses, and that was all so amazing, and the doctors, they had to put the full PPE on to come into the room and then take it all back off and then come back. And so they wanted to obviously limit the amount of times they would come into the room. And I completely understood that. But sometimes I'd be like, I just want my food. Like they'd leave it, the people would leave it outside on this little table thing. And I'd be like, I just want my food. And I'd be pointing at the nurses outside and I'd be like, can you just bring me my food, please? So it was just the most ridiculous things would get you really frustrated. But it wasn't, it was just, yeah, this horrible, yeah, no window. It was just awful. It was awful. You're just in this dark, not dark, it's got the hospital lights, but it was just really not nice.
No,
Yeah.
I could
And that was
imagine.
10. So it was just lots of Netflix on my iPad and just going, okay, I can't, this is completely out of my control. I can't do anything about this. So then that 10 days passed, and then I had to go back into another room of four. And then it just started again with the walking and with the, and I remember I had like friends who would call and or we would Zoom and we'd do things like those virtual escape rooms and you just talk to people. And then there were days where I was like, I just cannot talk to anyone. I don't want to talk to anyone. I don't want to see anyone. But it
Yeah.
was those things that got me through. It was just hard. The noises in the hospital as well, because there's obviously other people in there. You're waking up through the night, and then all the nurses do things differently. I have low blood pressure, and that's just how I am. I've always had low blood pressure. And most of the nurses who were there with me on an ongoing basis knew that. But then there'd be someone who would fill in and they'd be, oh no, your blood, and in the middle of the night, your blood pressure's low. We have to like elevate your legs and put your head down. So they would tilt my bed. And I'm like, no, I have low blood pressure. I'm fine. And they're like, no, we have to do this. And I'm like 2 o'clock in the morning and I'd be upside down with my legs up and my head down. And I'm like, oh my God, where's the other nurse? Where's the other nurse that knows that I have low blood pressure and I'll be fine? So there were just things like that that would just break you. And it's stupid stuff, but it wasn't about that. It was just the whole thing was quite
Y- y-
traumatizing, to be
Yeah.
honest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it just builds up, like everything just compounds. And because you've not had a chance,
Mm.
you don't get a chance to actually sit and really understand what you've just, the enormity of what you just went through, and physically,
Mm,
emotionally, mentally, like your physical body, even though that it felt fine, still is,
mm.
it still had chemicals injected into it. You've still had procedures done on it. So it's healing, it's trying to figure itself out too. And then you've
Yeah,
emotionally and mentally. And so you reach this breaking point and you're like, I physically, no matter what goes on after this point, I can't take it anymore. I can't
no,
handle it. And seemingly small, insignificant, it doesn't matter. It's you just physically, mentally, emotionally, that's
yeah.
it. Like you just you lose it. And it's again,
Mm.
like, it is so very valid. You reach that point and then it's those seemingly small things that tip you over.
Tip you over. And I didn't realize that, but when I got back out of the room, the 10 days in the room by myself, and I went back into a room before, there was this other woman in there who I can't remember her name now, but she'd been in there for quite a while as well. She'd probably been in there for about 8 weeks. And one morning she said to me, "Oh, are you okay, love?" And I said, "I think so. Why?" And she said, "Oh, you were having night terrors through the night. Sorry."
No, you're
And I
right.
didn't realize. Yeah. She goes, "You were."
Take your time.
And I said, "Oh, shit." I said, "Oh, sorry." And she goes, "Oh, no." She goes, "Oh, okay." She goes, "I just wanted to check in with you." So I didn't realize that had been happening as well. Yeah. So the whole thing was really hard. And eventually, so many blood tests later and whatever, they said, "We think it's time to have the procedure to, it wasn't, the pregnancy wasn't shrinking, but the blood vessels had constricted or whatever." And they said, "We think it's safe now." And I actually had a friend whose husband is a doctor. He's not an obstetrician, but he worked for Monash. And I called him just to, they knew what was happening. And he said, "If you want, I can access your files. I can talk to some people." I was like, "You do whatever you think you need to do. Just tell me, like, I trust you." And he knew that the guy who had been the head obstetrician at Monash, and he had just retired, but he gave him my file and he said, "I will wait until the numbers, the HCG numbers, get below this number." And then he mentioned this doctor. He goes, "Just drop this name. This doctor, he does very complicated surgeries for women who have had cervical issues and different types of cancers in their uterus and things like that." He goes, "So just drop this name." He's at Monash at in Moorabbin. So then the next time the obstetrician who was looking after me, because it was a public hospital, it was some whoever was on that day, but the guy who was in charge of my case was coming past when it was something really important to talk about. And he said, I said, "Oh, what about this guy?" And he goes, "Oh, how do you know him?" And I said, "Oh, my friend's works here, and he told me to mention him. He's done complicated surgeries before." And he said, he goes, "We were pretty sure it'll be safe." He goes, "But if you're more comfortable, we'll move you to Moorabbin Hospital and he can be on hand if anything." So that's what ended up happening. They moved me to Moorabbin and I had the procedure there, and everything went fine. And he came back in the next morning and he said it was all really smooth and clear and all of that. He goes, and then you get to go home the next day. So it was, yeah, it was, I think I went in on the 6th of August and I got out on the 19th of September.
That's
Yeah,
a very long ordeal, a very long, drawn out
yeah,
experience. Mm.
yeah. And I knew that I wasn't okay when I got home because my place, my apartment has always been my happy place. And when you go away on holidays or whatever, and then you come home and you walk in and you go, "Oh, I'm home. This is so good." I walked in and I was like, I just I didn't feel okay
Yeah.
to even be walking back into my place. I was like, and then that was when I fell into a bit of a heap. And then obviously, my partner, to his credit, while I was in hospital, he lived in Geelong. He came every few days from Geelong to and stop by. And after we had a conversation, after he completely didn't
Dismissed
understand why I
you.
hung up on him, yeah, we had a conversation about that, and he was like, okay, whatever. And but then and this is where I think with pregnancy loss, men don't know how to deal with it either. He was like, it's happened now, it's done. You just need to forget about it. And I was like, when I got home, was like, this is now my time. I need this time to process everything because I'm in my space. I knew I wasn't okay, but he just kept wanting to dismiss
Yeah.
or to move on. Now, okay, we've done this. It's been 6 weeks. We just need to, and then was his way of dealing with it, was brushing it under the carpet, and I couldn't.
No,
Yeah.
you need to, and the thing is, like, we can choose to brush it under the rug, and that's valid. Some people do that, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't go away. Like, you just got a lump under the rug then that you're going to keep tripping over, you're going to keep stepping on, you're going to keep,
Mm,
that lump is always going
yeah.
to be there. It's not going away.
Yeah.
And there's no timeline. Just because it's been six
No.
weeks, just because it's been a year, 5 years, 10 years, there is no timeline for that.
No.
And in that time that you were in the hospital, you didn't get a chance to process anything because there was constantly blood tests, injections, procedures. Like, you didn't get a chance to process anything. So then you get home away from that environment and you're like, okay, now it's just me. Now
Yeah.
this is my time to process it, and like dismissing the time that you had in the hospital because that's not that you didn't get a chance to process your loss in that moment,
No.
in that
No.
environment.
No. It was actually just trying to get through
Yeah.
every single day with all of the injections and with all of the fear as well of, oh my God, is today the day it's gonna happen that I'm gonna have a hysterectomy? Because that was always looming over my head.
Yeah.
That was always there. Is today the day that it was like, oh, is today the day that my uterus is going to fall out of me? Like, it was just all these irrational thoughts. Am I going to bleed out today? Is this the day that I'm going to have the surgery? Is this, I don't know. It was just constant. And I thought it was going to be 3 weeks. And then the only reason I found out it was going to be 6 weeks was because one of the nurses says, I said, oh, it's nearly 3 weeks. I said to him, it's nearly. He goes, oh, no. He goes, oh, is that what they told you?
Oh.
I said, yes. And he
So
said,
at every
oh, well,
turning point, you're like, you can.
yeah, he said, I said, what do you mean? He said, oh, no, in our conversations, like they say at least 6 weeks. They've told us 6 weeks that you'll be here for 6 weeks. And I said, oh, no, that's not what they told me. Anyway, so then that was another conversation with the doctor, but it did end up being 6 weeks. I had I had my birthday in the hospital. And then I remember I said to the doctor, can someone bring me some champagne? Can I just have a little bit of champagne? And he just looked at me and I said, I don't know. My sister can drop some off for me. And he goes, oh, if you really want to, you can. I just, I didn't have any. I didn't have any, but I just remember thinking, what sort of little bits of joy can I find in here while I'm in here?
Yeah.
But yeah, I got really hooked on game shows like The Chase. And so now if I'm at home at 5 o'clock, I watch game shows.
Yeah,
um,
even the years on.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But then after that, I don't know, I don't think I actually processed it properly for a very long time. But then after that, I just, and then went down, not a rabbit hole, but it was a bit of a rabbit hole because I was like, okay. And everyone was saying to me, at least you got pregnant.
Mm.
At least you got pregnant. You can get pregnant.
Yeah, it
And
doesn't
yeah,
help.
okay. It didn't help what had happened, but it also then sent me down this, not a rabbit hole, but it did, of, okay, if I got pregnant, I must have, I know I got one egg with my first egg free cycle. I must have eggs there. So then I had to wait a certain period of time for all of the drugs that they'd injected into me to be completely, like, it took about 3 or 4 months or something. And then I had to have checkups and make sure everything was fine and clear. And then the following year, so that was at the end of 2020. And then in 2021, I started egg-free cycles again because I was like, if I got pregnant, everybody said I must have eggs. So then I went through this month after month of egg-free cycles, and I did 8 that year. And it was like, it almost became not an obsession, but it can become a bit like that.
Yeah. Like a bit of an
And
addiction.
an addiction. And it gave me that focus, and that it was almost okay, that happened, but now what can I do? And so I launched into egg free cycle after, and I didn't have any breaks. I was like, nah, I'm just going to keep going. And then I remember by the end of 2021, I was exhausted. I was like, I just need to stop. I had
Yeah.
18 eggs though. By this stage, I'd collected 18 and they were all frozen. But I was exhausted and I was like, okay, I just need to. And I just remember thinking, how do I get off this baby train? Like, how do I get off the train? Because it does become quite an obsession and also something to focus on. I think if I was focusing on that, I wasn't focusing on,
What happened?
yeah,
So do you feel like it was a distraction? Like you maybe weren't able to, or you didn't know how to help yourself through the aftermath of what happened. So
yeah,
then, like you said, launching yourself into the next, okay, what else? What's this next step that I can do was a bit of a
yeah.
distraction so that you didn't have to feel or process what
Didn't
you'd
have
been
to
through.
feel or process. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I probably didn't for a long time. I was just like, oh, okay. And then I was like, okay, I've got these eggs. Now I've got these eggs. So I was single. I was dating a bit in between as well, but I was still single at that time. And then I was like, okay, I've got these eggs. And what am I going to do? What am I going to do with them? So then I started looking at donors. And because we were still COVID and it had been locked down, and I had to go on a donor registry for overseas donors on a waiting list because it takes about 6 months or something to get to the top of the waiting list. So I was on the donor waiting list, and then I was looking at local donors, but never really found anyone who was suitable. And it was just like constantly. So now, okay, so now I've got these eggs. Now what do I do with them? It wasn't even like, at one point, I remember it wasn't probably until so in 23 was the first time I went on a holiday since pre-COVID, and I went to Greece for 5 weeks. And I just went to Athens and stayed on one island for 5 weeks. And it's a place that we go back to quite often. So it's like a home away from home. And I just was there for 5 weeks, and I was like, oh, what I ended up getting a donor. So I did have a donor in the end, and then I fertilized all the eggs. So in 2022, I fertilized the eggs with a donor and ended up with 6 embryos. Some were tested, some were able to be tested, and 2 were abnormal. So I couldn't use those. So then I had 4 embryos. So then I started the IVF, and I had 3 by 20 in 2023. I'd had 2 failed rounds, not failed, but I didn't get to transfer because my lining then wasn't thickening. My lining was too thin. And then you have all these thoughts, oh, my lining's thin. Is that why my embryo implanted in my cervix last time? You go through all this stuff. Is that what happened? Is that
Try and
why
find
it
the
happened?
answers.
Yeah, because it's unexplained, right? Who knows
Yeah.
why these things happen? But you go back to that and you go, is that why that happened? But it wasn't. And then I was like, I need to get off this. I just need to stop. I just need to stop everything. But then in 2023, I tried again with IVF. And then my lining started to thicken. And then for some reason, it actually went backwards.
Oh.
So
Okay.
then in between scans, because you're going in for your scan so they can check everything, and then it was so many meals. It's meant to get to 6 or just over 6. It was so many, and then it went backwards. And then I was like, okay, I'm feeling, and that was at the start of 23 or 24. I can't remember. But it's been such a journey. And I was like, I just need to stop. I just need to stop everything. And I literally need to give myself a break.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until 2024, my second trip to Greece. So I went in 23, had 5 weeks, really rested, felt really rejuvenated, came back, felt like there wasn't enough time away from everything. So in 2024, I went back to Greece. And it wasn't probably until then that I started to really go, okay. And I went on a meditation retreat and started doing some sound healing. And it wasn't until then I remember being on this retreat and they said, you set an intention or something like that. And my intention was to let go, just to let go of everything, to let go of the need to be a mother, to let go, like literally letting everything go. And I just remember in this first sound bath that we did, I just couldn't stop crying. And I probably hadn't really cried since I'd come out of the hospital.
Yeah.
And I could get emotional. I'll remember I'd get pissed off or get frustrated and blow up either at my mum or just get really like it's because of what's going on within you.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until I started all of the meditation and the sound healing and the just the acceptance as well of whatever will be. And just it wasn't until then where I was like, okay, that I felt like I started to come back to myself, really. And it had been 4 years,
Yeah.
like a really long time. And
Yeah.
through all that 4 years, by the end of it, I was like, I just feel like I have completely lost myself
Yeah.
in that. And it was like, if I'm not doing this, I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah. Yeah. You just you keep chasing the thing, but then
Yeah.
without the thing, who are
And
you
what am I?
now?
Or who
Yeah.
am I without that?
Yeah.
And I think that was why I needed to stop
Yeah.
and go, okay, well, I need to really
Connect back to you.
access to you. Yeah. And it hasn't been easy to do that either.
No. And you're
But
not
I
taught
think,
that.
no, you're really not. And I think the pressure of, there is a lot of, we've spoken about this briefly, but there is a lot of pressure around becoming a mother.
Yeah. Just because
And
you're a woman, you need to become a mother. That's your body's job.
yeah. And I
Yeah.
look, it's an incredible body that does amazing things. And I just think, still, I think the things that we don't know about what our body can do are still, even now, like having, like, you really don't know anything about fertility until you start going down this path of, I've been told I can't,
Yeah.
or that I won't, or that it'll be a really big challenge, or whatever. And we actually know nothing about what our body can do and what our body is capable of, but also the assumption that mostly people make that, oh, yeah, I'm in my 30s or I'll get pregnant, or if I do IVF, I'll get pregnant. That's not a guarantee either.
Yeah.
But yeah, what I know now, what about fertility, I wish I knew probably 20 years ago,
Yeah.
because I would have done my egg freezing 20 years ago for starters, because of the quality. You don't get told that, really. People are talking about it more now, but not when I was in my 20s. I wish I'd known that 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know when I was in my
But
20s, I was focused on just me. I'm like, I just want to do me. I don't want to. I felt very selfish. Like I look back over it now and I'm like, I feel like I was really selfish back then. But then it was just where you are in your life.
but that's where you are, yeah. And you're
And
supposed to be that.
Yeah, and you're not told anything. And I had that assumption too. I'll have sex and I'll fall pregnant. It's going to be easy. And when it
Yeah,
wasn't, you're like, oh, I wish I had have known what I know now back, yeah, in my 20s, because then I wouldn't have just kept pushing it off. Like
yeah,
maybe I would have waited. Who knows? But
yeah,
it wasn't until my 30s that I realized I wanted to actually try, and then it wasn't working. Yeah.
yeah.
Hindsight's a lovely thing sometimes, but what we know now, we can only take moving forward. And maybe when you have your miracle baby, you can teach them everything that you
Mm,
know.
yeah.
And that's, yeah, I
That's
know.
what you could hope for.
That's what we can
But
hope for.
yeah, yeah.
I'm really
But
conscious of your time. So,
I know.
is there anything else? I know what we have spoken about is absolutely incredible, and I really do want to again acknowledge your vulnerability and how raw this still was for you. Is there anything else you wanted to share about where you are in your journey currently, or anything else
Mm,
that you've learnt along the way? Because I don't want to keep you too long because I
no,
know you
no.
have somewhere to be.
I'm actually currently in my 2 week wait. So I did do another cycle of IVF this year when I felt like I was actually back to me, really. So I'm in my 2 week wait, but I actually did the thing that you're not supposed to do when you're in the 2 week wait. I did the thing where I did the pregnancy test when I'm not supposed to do the pregnancy
Yeah.
test, and it was negative.
But we're putting that out of your mind because you're in
And
the surrender, let that go.
and I'm like, oh God, okay, I shouldn't have done that. We're just waiting now till Friday.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just waiting until Friday.
You
Yeah.
couldn't help yourself. It was just that's like
Couldn't.
that thing that you're not meant to
Um,
touch, and you just like, I'm told I'm not meant to touch it, but I really want to touch it.
but I really need to touch it. And it's so hard. The 2 week wait does a lot of things to your head. That's
Yeah.
been really hard. But look, I think, yeah, it's one of those things where you go, when is enough?
Yeah.
And I don't know what the answer to that is. Not today.
It might come to you, but yeah, and it's
Yeah,
a huge decision, and
it's
you
huge.
have to be okay with the outcome of that. Like
Yeah.
years down the track, 5 years down the track, 10 years down the track, you have to be able to put yourself there and go, if someone was to ask me those questions, will I be okay? Will it be
Mm,
okay that I stopped now and
yeah.
surrendered that future that I had
Yeah.
envisioned? Because you can, it can be very easy to say, oh, maybe I should just stop. But then your curiosity would get the better of you and go, what if I kept going? What would be different? What if
Yeah.
it worked
Yeah.
this next time? But you have to be really strong in yourself and in knowing that stopping was the right decision for you.
Mm.
And those what ifs, that curiosity isn't going to then send you down a spiral
Then
of
yeah.
maybe I should
Yeah.
start again. It's a huge decision. And
So,
I wouldn't expect you to have the answer to that like overnight or
no,
even in
no.
weeks. It takes time to come to that and to be
Yeah.
convicted in that for yourself and confident in that decision.
And sometimes you think a year ago I wouldn't have thought I would have tried again,
Yeah.
because I was like, okay. But then you go, oh, what if it works this time?
Yeah. That what those
Anyway,
what if.
but yeah, it's the what ifs. But also, I think in terms of what I know now about fertility, and even what I've learned about getting an egg donor, or like even with the embryos that I have left, is like now I'm like, I might actually get them thawed and tested, because I don't want to go through this. If this is a negative, you go through the whole process of the injections, and I don't want to just get a positive pregnancy test. If I go down this path, I want it to actually stick. There's just all of these things that I've learnt about along the way about fertility and options and things like that. So I think we are very lucky in all of the options and choices that we have. But I think it's really hard. The hardest thing is to know when is enough enough.
Yeah.
That's the hardest, I think, because it's one of those decisions that you then have to live with.
Yeah.
And you have to be okay with that decision.
Yeah. And being okay with that decision is, yeah, it's one of the hardest things, especially when you have this vision of being a mum. So surrendering and being able to let go of that, but also you don't have to do that on your own. There are people out there who can support you and guide you through that process, because
Yeah.
you shouldn't have to do this on your own. There are professionals that can help you, because there's going to be a lot of doubt and
Mm.
what
Oh,
ifs,
second guessing.
second
It's the
guessing,
second guessing. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if people want to reach out to you and connect with you, is there a way that they can do that?
Yes. I have my Instagram page. I don't really use Instagram, but I have Instagram. They can contact me there. You've got my,
Yeah,
they
yeah, I
can
do.
contact me there. Yeah. So
I
they
can,
can message me there. Yeah.
yeah, I can pop that in the show notes if
Yep.
anyone wants to connect with you, and even just to open the conversation. Maybe they're in there, maybe they've experienced loss, maybe they've experienced egg freezing and IVF cycles and want
Mm,
to maybe see what that maybe they don't know.
absolutely. Yep.
So to have someone that they can reach out to and talk to, whether it's just even being seen, being validated in their experience by
Yep.
someone else that's gone through it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm always open to, I don't know, even if it helps one person. I don't know how, but even if it does, yeah, I'm happy to do that. So thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. I could literally could have kept talking to you, but we could have probably ended up talking for hours on end. And
I know.
there's so
Yeah.
much of your journey that you've been through that is so hard, and still you're going through it. There's still so much of your journey that is unfolding. I just want to, again, I want to say that I see you in where you are, what you've been through, and what you've had to do for self-preservation in that time as well.
Yeah.
Thank you again so much, Demi, for being a part of the podcast.
That's okay. Thank you so much. Happy to chat again anytime.
I
Thanks, Shana.
know. Thank you. Thank you to all that have listened in. If this episode was valuable to you, I invite you to leave a review on Apple Podcasts, and I look forward to supporting you on the next episode. Thank you for listening in with me today. I hope you found this episode helpful. If you did, I would absolutely love to hear from you. Take a screenshot of this episode, share it to social media, and tag me at Institute of Healing_PL. I love seeing what is resonating with you right now. If you want to chat further, I invite you to connect with me through Instagram. Head over and follow my Instagram account, send me a DM, and let's open the communication. If you want to know more about how you can be the support for others, head to the show notes and fill out the application form for the Pregnancy Loss Practitioner certification. I want to also note here that what I share within the episodes is not medical advice. If you need further support, please consult your doctor. Thank you again. Much love to you. Be gentle with yourself, and I look forward to supporting you on the next episode.